Hey everyone, welcome back to Lesser Known Self, the podcast. I'm your host, Briana Boyd, and we are back for episode 3. Before we dive into another in-depth interview, I have to ask, have you subscribed? You liking something? You rating, reviewing? You sharing with somebody? Because I humbly request you to. I need you to. I want you to. I want to have you here. And more importantly, I want these conversations to get out into the world, and I want it to potentially help someone. So you pulling up to this podcast stream, you sharing, you doing all of those different things helps make that possible. So I thank you for it immensely. With that being said, before I introduce today's guest, let's take it back to about a year and a half ago in my life. I was living in Los Angeles. I was still on disability leave. I couldn't get a job, didn't have any friends or family, and my grandma was dying, and I was in a 2-bedroom apartment that I could no longer afford and watching a lot of YouTube. And I started discovering a lot of Black YouTube channels, commentary channels, review channels, people like Jessie Wu, Queen E, Roxy Says, Tammy Talks, a lot of Black women who break down reality TV or commentate on, or add commentary rather, on pop culture. And it felt very community based. It felt like, okay, this is something that I can do. And as I found more channels and more content in that way, I came across LittleBlackBook91, and immediately I was pretty struck by the channel because I don't like small talk. I want to talk about attachment styles. I want to talk about trauma. And sometimes it seems like those conversations are kind of few and far between to have. And I really loved his breakdowns. I learned a lot. And in the last year in particular, with YouTube doing their version of Unwrapped, I actually watched 374 videos of theirs this year. And I am, unfortunately or fortunately, the top less than 2% of viewers, which is insane, and I don't really believe that, but I do watch a lot of Kojo. And I learn a lot from Kojo. I think that his channel is a really fun place to get different perspectives from different Black people across the diaspora. As we get into his interview, he'll talk a little bit about his super panels that he does on his channel and some of the other things that Kojo does. He does other things than YouTube videos, and he's a very hardworking person. He's someone who describes himself as very analytical, someone who can skip the small talk, and I really appreciate the work that he does and the path that he's forging for himself. So I feel very honored to have him on the show, sharing his perspectives. So with that being said, let's dive into our interview today with Kojo of LittleBlackBook91. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Lesser Known Self. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. I have Kojo, a relationship coach, a content creator on YouTube and TikTok, best known for his YouTube channel, LittleBlackBook91, where he breaks down attachment styles and relationships in pop culture and reality dating shows. You can also find him and his footwork at the gym on TikTok at Black Muscle 91 with over 890,000 followers. How are you?
Hey, I am fantastic. I'm good. I'm alive. I'm well. I'm beaming and I'm ready to rock. So yeah, I'm in good stead and good energy, and I can't wait to can't wait to get into some conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited to have you. I've watched your channel for over a year now, so I feel really lucky to be talking to you. So the first question is one that I like to ask all of my guests. When no one else is watching and all the labels are stripped away, who is your lesser known self?
What a question. Holy Spirit, you're watching me all the time. I think me personally, who I am, when no one's watching, is I'm just a person that enjoys their own company. I enjoy being locked into my own mind, I guess, and thinking and contemplating, considering, debating. trying to figure out problems when it comes to relationships or coming to my own thought process. I think that's a major thing I find myself being, you know. I'm entertained by my thoughts of trying to understand, why do I do what I do, or why did this happen the way it did. And then other than that, you know, I'm a person that loves their Netflix. I love to watch TV shows and maybe sometimes disassociate from life a little bit by enjoying the throes of binge watching a little bit of some TV. I enjoy watching YouTube and watching other people's channels and seeing how they're creative. And I really just enjoy the Word of God, Bible, as well in my personal time, and worship and prayer. I spend a lot of time in those things as well. So I guess the person who I am when no one's really watching is someone who is a analytical thinker. Maybe that's the best way I can kind of put it in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. How do you feel your public image differs from that? Or do you feel like, for the most part, you kind of display your lesser known self a little bit more than maybe someone else?
How raw do we get here? Okay, so I think for me, the two are quite conjoined, right? Because I think when I do Little Black Book, it's mainly analytical. It's breaking down TV shows, which I love. It's talking about relationships, which I love, and that is somewhat fun, but it's more of a, you know, analytical game. And then we have my other side, which is on TikTok, which is I get to be more free self. I'm dancing, I'm being free, I'm smiling, I'm in a gym. I'm just allowing myself just to be able to explore creativity in a different way. How different is that from the personal person? Ain't no different. I'll be honest with you. Most people that meet me will tell me that I'm the exact same way. I'll still make the same jokes, still mess up somebody's name. I'll still have a conversation with you. It's always going to be analytical in some shape or form. It's got to be some level of deep. I don't really do surface conversation. So there isn't much difference between the two in that aspect. You know, if you've seen me on YouTube, I'm a little bit of a flirt. If you see me in person, I'm a little bit of a flirt. You know what I mean? So it's not really much different. You know what I mean? I can flirt with a paper bag, they say. So shoot, there isn't one around, so I can't flirt right now, but,
Okay,
you know.
period. I feel that. And I feel like that's also kind of part of your audience a little bit to a degree, too. I remember one time, the last time you were on Jesse Woo's live, you know, there was quite a lot of comments and stuff happening. So I think it's a really good dynamic, and I really like that. You also bring in that playfulness too into like your breakdowns and your coaching as well. So I really love that. In terms of your YouTube, I actually found it kind of surprising that when I went back to your oldest YouTube videos, I mean, you've been making YouTube videos for like 10 years now. And you've kind of always started with focusing on relationships and also faith as well. So I'd love to know, where did that initial interest in relationships in particular come from, and why did you decide to start a YouTube channel?
Yeah, I've always had an interest in relationships, and it's going to sound corny, but fantastic. Let it be corny. From a very young age, very, very young age, I've always loved relationships. And maybe that was the only way I could also get the ladies to pay attention to me at that time. You know, fantastic skill. But as a youngster, you know, I remember my first kind of earlier thoughts, maybe probably around secondary school, which would have been around about 10, 11 for us in UK. And just end up being in the friend zone for a lot of the ladies, actually just listening to their problems and listening to their issues, and then having a answer to be able to give them to help them along their journey, and actually seeing it actually could work. Now, no one's going to say I was a guru then. I was just speaking on instinct. But you know, I think from those early times, I saw that I loved talking about relationships. I love being able to have a conversation about human beings, and I loved observing too. One of the things I really loved from a very young age is sometimes I'll stand somewhere and just kind of watch. I know it sounds kind of creepy, but that's not how it sounds. It's not how it sounds, I promise you. But I just watch and just see how people move and see how they interact. And I'll ask myself a critical questions. Okay, why does somebody, if you have a group of 3 people walking on the pavement, why does one walk slightly behind? Does that mean that they're not as good friends as the first 2? Or does it mean that they're just having a really good conversation? What is the reason why? My brain starts thinking of these things and asking questions as to what I'm actually seeing right in front of me. So from a very young, early age, and that kind of spins in our family as well. I know the men in our family tend to be quite advisory for people in terms of relationships and stuff. So I can't even say it birthed in me. It had gone before me. So it's just something that I kind of walked into. And then to start YouTube, I actually wrote a blog. I was writing a blog before. It's called Gentleman Extraordinaire. I'm sure it's still up there. I haven't touched it. It was on the old WordPress, shout out to WordPress. And I had a blog on there, and I just wanted to talk about relationships and just be able to share my insights of what I'd seen and help people, hopefully.
Mm.
And then one day, I remember one of my friends had a digital camera at the time, a Sony one, a white one. I can't remember what it was called, and he started doing some recording, and I was like, damn, imagine we like digital recording on YouTube. And we used to talk about relationships a lot as well. So I was one day in 2015, I was like, you know what? We do the blog thing already. We can probably do the YouTube thing. Let's try and see what we can do. And I made a pact with the Lord. I said, listen, Lord, if it's for me, you'll help me and you'll help me to grow and just be able to, keep sustaining and being consistent with it, because I had a habit of starting things and quitting things. So if really is you, Lord, I'll have the sustainability power to stay in this. If it's not, well, I'll be out in the first year. You already know me. So yeah, that's what actually got me into YouTube. It was simply that I just thought to myself, I can be in front of the camera. I've done acting when I was younger. So this is a natural transition to talk about relationships in front of a camera. I just need to be able to just kind of transport those skills. So honestly, I love talking about relationships, and that was just the reason why I transported to YouTube. It was just because I thought another medium, another platform, another place to be able to talk about relationships as well.
For sure. I love that. And you're also a relationship coach. When did the coaching come about in terms of that journey in the last 10 years?
Love that. First of all, shout out to the Mineral Gang, the Little Black Book family, because they're the ones that got me into this, okay? All right? Because one thing I did not want to do is become any kind of relationship coach. All right, I've seen the
Mm.
people before me, the Kevin Samuels, the Greg Adams, the Red Pill them people there. I mean, they weren't Red Pill at the time. There was different names for them. But, I'd
Mm.
seen some of those coaches beforehand, and I didn't like what would happen. I always felt like when people herald you in that particular way, I always felt like, absolute
Yeah.
power corrupts. So I just didn't want to be in that particular space. So it was always a thing that I didn't want to do. But it was my audience. Shout out to the Mineral Gang again. They're the ones that told me, look, you should coach. Go ahead and do it. Like, we think you'll be good at it. I'm like,
Mm.
what do I even know to teach you? What I'm showing you on YouTube is literally what I'm seeing in real time. So like, it's like almost like when someone says you should be a comedian. There's an art to
Mm.
comedy. It's not just you're funny. I can be funny
For
in
sure.
real time.
Yeah.
I can make observations that are funny, but I'm not a comedian. So in the same fashion, I was like, I'm not a coach. I'm making real-time observations, which are very different to being an actual coach. But the audience pressed me on it, like, a few years into it. So I think 2021, I started it. But I didn't take it seriously. I'll be honest with you. I didn't take it seriously. It was very, very cheap as well at the time, because I just thought, what, let's see what happens. And I did a few clients, but it's not where it is now, of course. But I just started with a few clients, and I helped a few people, but I still wasn't like sold by it. And then so I've been doing it for the last 4 years, but the last 2 years I took it far more seriously when some of us came back from Egypt. That's another story for another day. But when I came back from Egypt, the Lord kind of spoke
Yeah.
to me and was like, all right, look, we're gonna really now transform the content that you're doing. So if you've noticed my content changing, it's because there's certain content I can't engage with anymore. But he was like, we're going to transform the content you're doing. We want to streamline it a little bit, and I wanted to focus on what I'm calling you to do. And so actually, before I went into coaching again, I won't say too much, but it was a dream that I had, very interesting dream I had. It was a dream vision. One day as I was praying, it was biblical proportions, love it. But I was in my room, and I remember I was like halfway between sleeping and then kind of awake, almost in a sense. It felt like, and in this dream, I just saw uh myself going for this sword, which represents truth. And so I was like, I see what you're, okay, I think I know what you're trying to say to me, Lord. I'm not really sure 100%, but I think I'm getting where you're going. And he just kind of showed me over a few different dreams that, okay, look, this is what I want you to be. And I think the final one that he showed me was me sitting in front of my desk, which I'm sitting in front of right now, talking to you. And he showed me that, and in the dream, I was talking to a client. But I recognized the
Mm.
voice, and I was like, I recognize his voice. And I was helping her with a situation. And that's when I said, okay, you're telling me to go for it now. So actually, I,
Wow.
I started putting the groundwork in to go into coaching full time 2 years ago. So yeah, when the Lord decides, he decides, innit? Do you know what I mean? When he's calling you, he's calling you. So that was a real reason as to why I got into coaching and why we're here now.
Okay, beautiful. I mean, you've kind of touched on it a little bit. You're in the gym.
Mm.
There's no social anxiety when you're dancing. You kind of come across as a very confident person. You know, originally I had wrote down a question to ask you about imposter syndrome, and I kind of like took that
Mm.
off because I didn't really kind of get the vibe that that's something that you face. Let
Oh, I
us
do.
know, is that something that you experience? And if not, do you feel that your confidence comes from your sense of faith, or where do you think that comes from?
I definitely have imposter syndrome. Definitely a lot of times when I'm starting something new, even when I started coaching, I felt some level of imposter syndrome because I said, what do I know that I could teach somebody? What gives me the authority to
Mm,
be quote unquote an expert or a teacher of something? You know, I know some stuff, but what gives me that
yeah.
authority? So definitely in the beginning when I started coaching, there was that level of imposter syndrome. In terms of obviously like maybe like the TikToks that I used to do, less of that imposter syndrome, more of a case of it's in real time social anxiety. So I do actually have social anxiety like everybody else. The key thing is in that moment, I'm willing to push past it a little bit. But even I
Mm,
recognize there's still aspects of me that are not emotionally safe in my creativity. Let me give you an example of that. You ever watch somebody else on social media and you should have a response like, oh, that's so cool. But your response is they're annoying. Why did you do
mm,
that in public for? And
yeah.
I'm like, wait, hold on a minute. You do something in public.
Mm,
That in its essence is my level of being frustrated at the fact that they can do something I can't necessarily do. I feel like they're able to be free. So I definitely feel some level of social anxiety in some aspect, or at least emotional safety, where I'm lacking in my creativity, where I kind of restrict myself and judge myself. And so whenever the TikToks go viral, when I see them go viral, it's normally because I've been battling in that moment and saying,
mm,
just be free, you know? So yeah, the virality of TikToks that, you know, explode usually for me are usually moments where I'm actually overcoming that social anxiety. I'm willing to do something a little bit out there, right? So if you've seen some of my TikToks, you see the latest ones, I'm wearing shorts on top of trousers and I take the shorts off. And people
mhm.
ask me, why are you taking the shorts off? There's no reason. It's just, it looks embarrassing. So you're asking the same question I'm asking. I don't know why I'm taking them off. So, you know what I mean? But it's about being able to express yourself freely, right? Because why shouldn't I be able to take the shorts off while I've got trousers on the top? I don't know. It's just funny. You know, it's doing something beyond what you would normally judge as being, why would you do that? And I know that someone watching will be like, that's so annoying, that's so corny. And that's actually all right. It's all right that they're saying that because they're witnessing what makes them feel uncomfortable in that space, whilst others are feeling freedom. And that's sometimes what has to happen a lot of times for creativity to have its fullness. Some people are going to feel restricted, others will feel empowered by your creativity. So, you know, just, yeah, just a little bit of that. I do suffer a little bit of imposter syndrome as always. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And we're going to dive into a little bit of attachment styles in a bit. And I'm curious to know if, you know, maybe that kind of relates to your attachment style as well. Because
Mm.
I know that I personally can relate to being an observant person. And I can also relate to challenging myself. And also, I really pride myself on not being uncomfortable with uncomfortable conversations, but I also can challenge myself and I can challenge myself a little bit too much sometimes. So
Mm.
I'm interested in kind of diving into that in a little bit. But before we get there, you do these super panels on your YouTube channel that I find really unique. And over the course of me watching your channel, I've become familiar with some of these people that you have as your guests on the super panels, a mix of people who do make content like Seaway or El Cid, and also just,
Hmm.
you know, people. How did the super panels come about, and how did you become connected with some of your guests?
Yeah, man. Shout out to the Mineral Gang again once more. So Super Panels actually is an idea birthed from watching another content creator called Nella Rose. So she's a UK
Mm,
I don't call it influencer, you can call it influencer, yeah. She used to host in person like videos. She used to do at university, right? She'll have like a few of her friends together and they'll talk about a topic, but there'll be a bunch of them in the kitchen. I used to love it.
mm,
And I wondered how I could do the same thing. But I realized a lot of my conversations with people are happening digitally. They're not happening in
yeah.
person per se. And it's a lot more harder to do it in person, trust me as well. But yeah, so then on YouTube, I was like, okay, how can I do this on YouTube? I remember when I started doing reviews for Ready to Love and Married at First Sight in like 2021, I was getting a lot of traction at the time. So when I was getting a lot of traction, people always had something to say in the chat. So eventually what would happen is I was like, okay, well, maybe I can send a link to people and see if they would want to jump on and say their piece. And actually, that's how
Mm-hmm.
it started. People would jump on through the link and come on and say their piece, and then they'll jump off or whatever, blah, blah. And eventually, shout out to the first round of super panelists. My first batch of people, what we did is they were just part of coming on, and I just loved their insight. I loved their voice. A lot of them we had about 8 or 9 women and 2 men, I think, at a time. And the insight was just so sublime. It was so deep. It was so intellectual. It was powerful. We had people like Maria. We had people like, I used to call one of our people the prayer warrior. She knows who she is. Shanae would come on as well. And we had so many people coming through who just had just great insight. These were ladies who just have just renowned thought processes. And that's actually how it started. Kenny as well. And then we'll just bring them all, we'll just started bringing them on regularly each week. And I just developed a little group chat, brought them in each week. And that's actually how the super panels actually started. It was just like organic people coming on, wanting to share their thought processes and then going from there. But yeah, the idea was birthed because I watched another content creator do like live talks in person and stuff.
Okay, I really, really like it. And I also enjoy hearing people's different perspectives. And I think that you speak so highly about like your audience and your guests in terms of kind of like honestly, like the critical thinking or just like the way that they view some of this content that's going on. So I think like watching channels like yours also kind of shows that there can be a lot of like differences in the diaspora, and that's okay too. I think like watching the first season or 2 of Love is Blind UK and then hearing different perspectives of like people in the US, people in the UK, and understanding that like a Black Brit experience is something different that I might not be able to speak to, but we are also all Black people as well. So I also love that you have people from different parts of the country. In the US, you have people in the UK, you have people who travel and kind of phone in. So I really like that part of your content for sure.
Thank you.
So I'd love to get into a little bit of attachment work or a little bit of your history. You do share insights from your personal life in your content as well, but I don't know if you ever really make it like the focus, like I'm the headline of this breakdown of this attachment style. To the degree that feels comfortable, can you share a little bit about your upbringing and what you were like as a child?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, growing up in a Ghanaian household, maybe an African household, if anyone could relate. I was a bubbly kid, firstborn, and I enjoyed being able to be creative. I love football, I love soccer, I love being able to run around. I had a lot of fun growing up when I was young. But then it gets to certain points where there's certain instances I remember that began to kind of shape me in the way that I process information. I think one of the times I've shared online already was like having homework and then not being able to necessarily give the homework to my dad without getting beaten for getting the answer wrong. And I just started to recognize, okay, we ain't going to do this again. We're not trying to get beat for getting an answer wrong when I don't understand it, which is why I'm asking you. And so that was one of the things. And then kind of noticing birthdays, not necessarily getting exactly what you wanted. And again, I'm not really, I understand as a kid, you don't know what's going on. Do you know what I mean? You just know that these are things that are happening. And I think at that time when I'm not, also the birthday's not really getting what you want, and like, okay, well, maybe I just need to be able to be okay and lower the expectation and kind of just be like, you get grateful for what you got in a sense, right? And just move past that. I remember that situation, and it was still my fault partly, but it was, I just wanted to be understood. I remember I got into altercation at my auntie's place with a young kid, and basically we were doing a group task. There's like 3 or 4 of us doing those, how do you call it? I won't call it word search. It's when you had to like figure out the word is and kind of reverse the words, whatever. I don't know how you call it, but yeah, those particular games, whatever. And we had to have like a list of. So we're obviously going through them, and I've answered probably like I'd answer like 20 of those. I can't lie to you, right? And I'm like 10. I'm probably like 12 or something, 12, 13 maybe. And this kid's like 15, and I'm like, bro, in my head I'm thinking about, and this is very arrogant. In my head I'm thinking to myself, how dumb can you be? You're 15 and you don't know nothing. And then because it was a cash prize at the end, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. So I'm going to win this prize of £15 and you going to eat and chop off my back? Oh, sir, come on. Myself and the other person was really good. We were just answering the stuff, and the other person was kind of flexing in and out. And it really frustrated me. So I remember when obviously we came third and we got £15 at the end. And I told my auntie, I'm not giving that other guy another £5. Like, he's not getting it, bro. Like, we're going to share between myself and the other person. My auntie was like, you can't do that. Like, he's a part of the team. I said, I don't care. I'm going to do it. I don't care. And then when my auntie said, you can't do that, man, I walked out and I slammed that door. The door came off the hinges. I remember I slammed the door and the door came off the hinges. I was so angry. I gave up my five. I said, here, you know what? You can have my £5 on top of that as well. Take it. I don't even want the money anymore. I was that pissed off at the time. And I remember when I got back home, obviously my auntie had to inform my dad or whatever. And, you know, she told him. And obviously my dad was like disappointed or whatever, blah, blah. But I was like, bro, do you not get it that man was riding off my back? I don't think you understand. I don't think you get it. He was riding off my back. Like, I was doing all the work while I was grinding. He didn't do nothing. You know, and I was wrong for the anger. Absolutely. And I always say this to my clients. You are absolutely valid in how you feel, but your actions can make you wrong. So the emotions that I felt were absolutely real, but they weren't validated. So it was, and I think a lot of people grow up in households like this, where the action and the emotion are actually judged exactly the same, and they're not the same. And when people judge emotion and the action as the same, it usually is because people don't have a good understanding of the difference between emotions and actions. Actions aren't emotions, okay? And emotions aren't actions. My emotions can lead me to an action, but it still isn't the action or the emotion, you know? There's a difference between the two. So for me, getting judged off that a lot of times, where the emotion equals the action, is that you don't have a choice but then to surrender to that, because you're the child in this situation. Yeah, just growing up, like, at certain points, there were certain things that I was starting to, if I look back on, I'm starting to see, okay, there's a lot of dismissiveness happening, but it's like subtle, so you don't see it all the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is not to say that my dad didn't come through for me many times too. There's several times. Wait, I tell a story about when I got into a fight with a young man, and it wasn't even a fight because the boy just punched me in my eye. Like, he cheap shot me. All right. And I saw my dad, he ended up coming downstairs. He ended up almost getting into a fight with another kid, like, and the police had to get involved and da-da-da. So there are also moments where he has come through for me, protected me, and all those things as well. It's not to say that he hasn't done those things. It's also just to say that, but there's also a reason. Without that emotional connection, all those other actions are great, but then a child suffers because they're not emotionally connected. And that's how I felt a lot of times. A lot of responsibility without there necessarily being the aftercare. A lot of responsibility without necessarily the overhead or the overseer to also input into you in that way. You're kind of thrust into a leadership position very early on with your siblings as well, without them being really inputted into. You're taught actions, you're taught responsibility, but the other aspect, which is like there's a need for like love and care and an emotional aspect to build that person up. So not saying I didn't get it at all, but it's to say, like, because it was often kind of missed, and it's more about you get praised for what you're doing, you kind of just find yourself in a space where it's like, don't worry about your emotions. They're not important. What's important is doing the job. You know what I mean? So yeah, I guess that's part of my upbringing. It was fun. There were some aspects that was fun. There were some moments where I was like, what's going on here? Don't like what's happening. There were some moments where I felt like I think a lot of the words I would sometimes use is sometimes unjust, unfair, you know, I felt like I wasn't heard. And a lot of those kind of things would be present with that as well. And just get on with it, you know. You have to get on with it a lot of times in school. And a lot of times being left on your own to kind of figure things out, you know. You learn to cook by yourself, basically. Well, I won't say I learned to cook by myself, because that's a lie. You know, you kind of pushed quickly to kind of learn this quickly by yourself. You know what I mean? Like, once you've learned eggs, that's the baseline, my friend. Start learning the rest by yourself.
It's interesting because I was watching one of your videos in the last couple of months, and you were breaking down a fearful avoidant. I don't know if it was Huda or somebody else. And I'd always really identified as more of an anxiously attached person. I wasn't really familiar with disorganized attachment, because that kind of came a little bit later. And so I was just like, I'm an anxious person. And so what I had commented was, Oh, well, like, can you change attachment styles? And I'm paraphrasing, but you said something along the lines of you were probably a fearful avoidant and you just showed up as more anxious when you were younger, and now it's showing up as more avoidant. And that kind of awoken a lot within me. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about what the fearful avoidant attachment style is in particular. And
Yeah, thank you for even asking that. So from obviously what I've kind of understood about the fearful avoidance, oftentimes they grow up in particular environments where the parent or the caretaker is usually a space or an energy source of comfort as well as also fear, right? So an example could be that you have a parent that loves you, but also is an angry parent, a very angry parent, right? And what you will see is that you can easily trip that parent up into being angry. And so actually what you start to recognize is that a parent's got unpredictable tendencies. That means that you don't ever really know how to handle your parent. You're not ever sure what could happen at any given moment. Your physical safety could be compromised, right? That's one aspect. You can have parents that are very controlling, that want to control every step of your life and actually are living vicariously through you, where you feel like you don't have any freedom to be yourself. You're living the life of your parent almost in a sense, right? And that creates
yeah.
a fear of creates a fear within a child of actually I can't do anything else apart from what you've said and what you want me to do. In that aspect, there are certain situations which are I say the more obvious ones. Parents that have any drug or alcohol, addictions or narcissistic tendencies, these can easily birth fearful avoidant children as well, because they can where the parent who they love and care about, who they need, is also the source of that comfort, but at the same time the source of the pain. So almost like almost an example of that in a physical kind of picture realm would be saying I love you at the same time hitting you, right? So like that would be what it would look like. And so the child learns that there's no real safety here, but I need you. So this is what's going to create the hot and the cold. It's like I'm afraid, but I also need your safety. I haven't got a choice. And so the children grow up in those kind of environments. As they go into our adult relationships, they kind of take those emotional patterns into relationships. So you will see that with fearful avoidance, they will be in relationships where oftentimes the partner is emotionally unavailable. It's safer that way because in a relationship it's low stakes. There's no
Mm-hmm.
force, there's no push to be immediate relationship, because if there is an immediate relationship, there is things that are going through the back of the mind of a fearful avoidant. Number one, am I good enough? Number one. Number two, am I going to be hurt in this situation? Am I going to be betrayed,
Mm,
rejected? Am I going to be abandoned? And if I open myself up, I'm leaving myself open for you really doing some damage. At least if I'm closed off,
yeah.
I can still manage the fall or manage the pain that may come. But if I open myself up to you and I trust you and I open my heart to you, at this point in time, the punch, we always about the punch that comes. The punch that comes that you don't see is actually more painful than the one that you did see. The one that you saw, you can get yourself ready for. The one you didn't see knocks you out clean. And that's oftentimes how people can see things. So fearful avoidants don't want to open themselves up too much, and they're oftentimes testing people and testing the environment. Let's say I'm using a really silly example. They may say something like, "How do you feel about uh, the weather?" I'm using a very extreme example. Like, how do you feel about the weather? They already know. They already know your answer, but they're now trying to see to make sure. Like last time you said blue, but is it still blue?
Mm,
That's gonna make sure they're trying to almost catch you out in inconsistencies and see, or let's say for instance, they witnessed you say something to somebody, and then they'll ask you a question based upon what they saw, and they're gonna see, are you gonna lie, or are you gonna tell a fib, you're gonna tell a half truth, and so they're trying to test to see whether you're going to be incongruent with who you said you were and what you're actually doing in order to keep themselves safe. And the moment they actually notice any pattern that is incongruent, they then start, I call it passive aggressively beginning to act, which is they start pulling away, which is avoidance side. They start pulling away. What they're really hoping for is that you'll come and then say, what's going on? Come and collect them. Say, like, look, this is what actually happened. Explain it to them and then be able to pull them right back in again. what tends to happen is that doesn't happen. What tends to happen is that the other person, if they're, especially if they're emotionally unavailable, or if they're an avoidant kind of individual person, is that they also then pull away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what
Mm-hmm.
happens? You got to swing right back, because now the fearful avoidant is afraid of being abandoned. So that's where the anxious side of things kicks in. And so now it puts them in a space where with anxious attachment, it's all about proving your self-worth. It's all about
Mm-hmm.
servitude. It's all about other people's needs and priorities. It is almost
Yeah.
the antithesis of the avoidant. The avoidant is quite selfish in some aspects, thinking about themselves. The anxious person is quite unselfish in some of the general perspective, because they always think about other people. In essence, they're both exactly the same. Because if you over concentrate on somebody, or you under concentrate on on other people, you have the same effect, right? And so that anxiousness drives them right back to that person, and wants them to go again and try and attain that person and bring them back in, so they abandon them. And this creates a massive cycle, because of course, what ends up happening, if the fearful avoidant doesn't actually discuss what's actually wrong with them, and doesn't discuss
Yeah.
what's actually happening to them as to why they even wanted to pull away in the first place, it's about to restart, because the other person who they've gone to collect maybe has come back, but they haven't solved the issue. So the
Mm.
very same feelings and emotions are still there. They haven't been dealt with. So what's going to happen again? The cycle. The person's going to pull
Yeah.
away again, because they're like, I can't get my needs met. I don't know how to say that I need this from you. And I'm still
Yeah.
scared about the situation. So all that happens is this is kind of like cycle that happens. So for a lot of fearful avoidance, it's difficult at points being able to communicate sometimes what's in the mind. But I find that fearful
Mm-hmm.
avoidants are very deep people. They're very intellectual. They are compassionate. They're caring. They're very loving. They're very attentive. They care a lot about people, and they're very, I always feel like they're very good in career jobs as well, because they can have a level of focus when it comes to career, because that makes sense for them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they have lots of great traits. It's just relational. It can be a little bit more difficult, because
Mm.
they oftentimes have a lot of harsh judgments on themselves, which doesn't allow them to show up
Yeah.
effectively in a relationship. So if you're having
Mm.
like conflicting emotions where you're like, I'm happy, but I'm also sad about the situation, they've judged it like, I
Mm-hmm.
must be crazy, rather than looking at it going,
Mm.
actually, it's normal for me to have a little bit of happiness and a little bit of sadness in this moment. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Let it pass.
Yeah.
But they're judging it actively, like, oh my gosh, I feel sad and
Mm.
angry and happy. I must be a bad person. Why do I feel sad about the situation? Why do I feel happy about the situation? And so all those judgments create an emotionally unsafe place for themselves to be able to
Mm.
fully show up in relationships as well. So it's there's a lot going on for a fearful avoidant a lot of times, in that space as well. And so there are so many different areas that can touch on things like boundaries. Something I used to tell my clients is that I've noticed with fearful avoidance, I call it the voice from the deep. That especially if you've been unfortunately abused, or you've gone through some level of mental, emotional, even sexual abuse, right? There's a call of the deep, that I call it. That there's something that you hear, some drums beating in the back of you, and you hear it, and you end up going to where that sound is coming from. And that sound takes you to the place you don't want to be at. But some reason you're drawn to that place, and you don't know why you're drawn to that place. And it's like the patterns seem to keep happening for you in that space until you solve the issue. So I find out with a lot of fearful avoidance that if they've been through a lot of that abusive aspect, they find themselves right back there with other people who are abusive. And it's like,
Yeah.
they don't know why. It's like, I'm drawn to that person. So yeah, I used to call it the call of the deep. So there's a whole bunch of
Mm.
things in there with fearful avoidance that I've learned in that space as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you started kind of going into what I was going to ask next, which is
Mm,
I find it me personally, I find it extremely confusing.
mm,
Like I'm in a place where in the last 2 weeks I'm struggling with exactly what you're talking about, where um I don't trust my voice, which is something that
mm,
you talk about in your content as well. So if I ever have a feeling or a thought, my first thing is that that thought or that feeling is wrong because I'm being too
mm-hmm,
rigid or I'm being too judgmental. So I'd love to ask, like, I guess that's why it's called a disorganized attachment, but how can
mm,
people kind of begin to get out of some of that confusion? To kind of round out my question into a real question.
yeah.
In particular, you've brought up things like fearful avoidance can be mind readers. That's something that I feel
Mm,
like I can I can definitely feel like I can be, I feel like I can feel people's feelings and I can feel people's thoughts. And you've kind of said you kind of need to challenge that a little bit because it's not always that. Also being a nurturing person, but usually not getting your needs met. What would be like the first step that you might recommend to a fearful avoidant that does want to kind of grow
Good
personally?
question. Funnily enough, I've answered this question last night as well, someone so randomly. But yes, so for the fearful avoidant, I would say the first things first is just to sit down. It's to sit
Mm,
down. It's to sit down and slow it all the way down. And to slow it down means to actually start to look inward rather than outward. And that is to start taking stock of some of the thoughts that you're actually having. Because a lot of times what we do is we are moving and we're not actually taking stock and being mindful of what we're actually outputting. We just kind of get the result. So what I would say is first and foremost, sit down.
mm,
Give yourself 5 minutes to just allow your brain to think. That in itself is hard enough to do because most people don't like to sit down and think, right? Not say they're not thinkers, but they don't like to think about what they're thinking about
mm,
because there is a door that you've kept shut for a very long time. So the very first thing is sit down, pause, give yourself 5 minutes, no talking, no speaking, just allow your brain just to flow. That's the
mm,
first thing, right? We're practicing some level of mindfulness and allowing our body just to kind of be present as well as our mind, okay? That's the first thing. Number two, pen and paper is now the time, okay? I love pen and paper, but you can do it by audio as well. It's to now start
mhm,
jotting down some of those thoughts,
mm,
okay? So we've allowed our thoughts to flow, but now we're going to start jotting down some of those thoughts. And the reason why we're doing that is we need to also be mindful and present of what thoughts we're actually having. Because sometimes we don't know, sometimes we don't recognize the depth of what's happening until we're facing it face to face. You know what I mean? A bit like a flamingo sticking its head in the ground, almost in a sense. And so the second thing is to start writing out some of your thoughts or start speaking into audio. You can use your voice memos on your phone or voice notes and just kind of speaking out what you're actually feeling. Okay. And number
mm,
three, listen to it back. Listen to it back so that you can start being like, wow, is that what I'm thinking? Is that what I'm hearing? Are these the things that I'm saying about myself? Right?
yeah.
Because the step 4 phase is what I do a lot of clients as well is, and it's a stolen technique, it's not mine. So, you have to look at yourself as the child in this instance. So what does that mean? It means if you're going to say something or think something, the question is, would you have that thought about another child? So if the child was standing in front of you, that thought process you have, would you find that thought process acceptable? If you know you wouldn't find that acceptable talking about a child in that way, you can't talk about yourself that way. That's the
Mhm,
barometer. If you saw a child and they were to cry when they came to you and you would say to them, damn, that child's crying. Da, da, da. If you know you wouldn't say that, that wouldn't be your natural
yeah.
MO to say, how are you saying it to yourself? Right? You want that kid to feel what? Safety. You want that kid to feel what? Love. That you want that kid to feel like they're not coming to you and you're turning them away. So why are you turning yourself away? So this is what we have to face ourselves inwardly and start changing some of the judgments we're making on ourselves. So things like your emotions with sadness, anger, and with fear, and start looking at some of the judgments you have, belief systems you have around them. Right? I find
Mhm,
with a lot of avoidance, the anger phase is like, I'm not an angry person. I don't like anger. And they
yeah.
don't recognize that actions are not emotions, as I said before. So one of the things I do in coaching is I get people to name actions. For instance, shouting. And I say,
Yeah.
what do you associate that with? Someone might say, oh, anger. And I'll be like, but can you shout and not be angry? Oh yeah, you can. Okay, well then why did you associate with anger? That's exactly what's happening. So we start associating actions with emotions and then we start judging those actions, not recognizing that the two are not necessarily, they're linked, but they're not the same. So you can choose now to act in a way. Even if you feel emotionally angry, you don't have to shout, scream, a thing, because your judgment's coming from the fact that when I get angry, I know I'm going to cuss somebody out. I'm not going to do that. And you're not recognizing those things are byproducts. You're choosing those things. But I need to be able to give you that understanding that you can choose to do that or choose not to do that. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, that step 4 is really important. Just like kind of making sure that you're starting to challenge thought processes that are incongruent with how you speak to a child, because you are now that child. Right? Most of us who have an insecure attachment, The reason why we're acting where we are is because there's an immaturity in that phase because we were not allowed to grow in that space. We were stunted. So there's a child there, and we need to be able to speak to that child in a way that we speak to a child. And that's step number 4. And I think obviously the other steps could be like working on emotional connectivity and emotional language so that you can work on your regulation. The hardest thing about regulating yourself is oftentimes you don't have the words. But you don't have the words because you don't have the language. So without language, we can't actually speak what we want to speak. So in my coaching sessions, we take them through the emotional wheel and I tell them, slow it down. Ask yourself in this scenario, how do you feel? I don't know. Hold on. Before you jump to that, I don't know. Let's look at the wheel. Let's start placing some of these emotions, right? And you're going to find out there's like usually between 5 to 16 emotions you're going to feel at one given time, or at least feelings, I can even say. And so we pay attention to it because we want to understand this is what you're actually feeling. And the reason why you're overloaded is because you don't have enough CPU, or I should say RAM, to process the information, because we haven't built up a library of vocabulary to be able to say, okay, these are all the things I'm feeling at one point in time. All you're knowing is, I just have a rush of emotions. I don't know what it is. Well, it's like having information or having data without there being some level of analytics to go with it to pinpoint in the right direction. Same thing with our emotions. So for fearful avoidance, it's letting them know that you don't have to act because you felt something. You don't have to act on those feelings. You're allowed to observe them, and you're allowed to let them pass. And you're allowed to choose whether you want to act or not act, and recognize that your voice is as important as anybody else's, and that you can't mind read. And the way to stop yourself mind reading is, first and foremost, if you're not centering yourself in any given situation, and that feels very selfish to do, but if you're not doing that, then you're going to start flowing into mind reading. If your first thought is not, how do I feel in this moment, but why is it they're doing? If you're already there, you've gone already too far. Come back. Any situation that happens to you, any situation that you're viewing, you have to ask yourself, wait, hold on. How do I feel? And the only way to do that is to sit down and pause. Don't move, don't run, don't rush. Just sit there and go, how am I feeling? Center yourself in the situation.
Powerful. Thank you so much, Kojo. And, I think that's a really good indication of like the work that you do as well. And, taking this big thing that feels like I can't really figure out how to address it, and going to someone like you can get a roadmap to get some help in making that happen, because it is a journey and it is something that takes time, and you can definitely get some help with that along the way. I'd like to ask you one last question really quick. What is your attachment style, and how do you think that factors into all of the work that you do today?
Yeah, so I align more with dismissive avoidant attachment style. And number one, how it helps with the work is, I can't lie to you. After I finish the session with you guys, I do not think about you again. It doesn't even, it flies out of my brain until I come back to the next session. So these things don't bother me when I'm having my sessions. People ask me, do you not feel emotionally drained? I'm like, nah, because really and truly, it goes in and it goes out, right? But with the dismissive avoidant attachment style, which is in its name and its essence, dismissing your emotions, the hardest thing I found myself and having to try and improve, and I'm not even all the way there, I'll be honest with you, is creating friendships with people organically, new relationships with people, right? Because if they're too fast, I automatically start having my back against the wall. Like when some people are telling me, I love you, I like you, or I don't know about this relationship, just friendships even, like people saying like, I don't know what it is about you, but I just like you. And I'm like, nah, I know I'm amazing, but why'd you like me so quickly? I'm already thinking about, something. I'm trying to control the intimacy level in terms of like the speed of how it comes and goes. So sometimes that can be a little bit difficult in terms of, sustaining friendships. I know people have complained sometimes in the past, like, yo, you don't check up on me, da da da. And sometimes it's just hard because in your brain, it's like having a plate of food. I always describe it as having a plate of food, and then during the week, things are being taken from your plate. So by the end of the week, it's just crumbs left. Sometimes you're not even at the end of the week. Sometimes you're midway through the week, and there's only crumbs on your plate. And people want something from you, and you're like, I don't have it to give. So this is where the avoidant comes in. ignoring people's calls. This is where you feel overloaded with people's problems. This is where snaps and lashes out comes out from, because you feel like no one really understands and you're asking more of me, but you haven't actually communicated that. This is where you go into isolation. This is where you don't want to ask people for help. A lot of these things come into place as well, right? And make it difficult to be more secure. So that journey has been an interesting one. But with my clients, how it's really helped is that, again, I'm very analytical. I'm trying to analyze things, and I recognize that, not take things personal. So when things are happening with clients, I'm not taking it personal. Of course, that's work I've had to do, because I understand that you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to understand, and sometimes that can be very painful. So for me, being that particular attachment style, I've learned there are some great benefits, but I've also noticed that there's a lot of deficits which I'm having to try and work out and iron out the kinks. I think I did a video. I mean, I did a video with Dear Future Wife, and I spoke about this, the distinct distance between myself and my parents. And I spoke about how crazy it was. I said, if they were to pass at the time, I'm gonna be okay. I ain't gonna cry, I ain't gonna cry, I ain't gonna be mad at it. Like, I'm gonna keep on moving on, right? That's the emotional detachment aspect, which I'm learning and growing to do more of healing of that, to become more attached, and be a better friend or a brother, or a better partner in those spaces as well, to learn how to really tune in and also recognize my own feelings and situations, so that I'm not avoiding you when I feel some type of way, but I'm not sure how to communicate that with you, or to avoid conflict because I don't want to have an argument right now because, I feel like you're going to do this or that, right? It's learning to actually confront those things. So, it's been an interesting journey. We're still growing. We're always growing. And, I think it's a daily battle to try and make sure that you're becoming more assertive. And I think the last thing I'll say is, just the other day it happened. I was at dinner with a couple of friends, and we had ordered food. But I noticed someone else had my side food, and I was like sitting there like, do I say anything? I don't want to be a broke boy. This doesn't feel right. I just didn't want to say anything. I don't want to feel like I don't want to embarrass somebody, or I don't want to be embarrassed or shamed. You get me? And it took me a couple of minutes still sitting there for a little while. And then I was like, I think you're eating my wings. She didn't know, like, she genuinely didn't know, like, she didn't know. It's me thinking, I'm going, how do I say this to her? And I'm sure, when I said it in the end, she was like, oh, okay, I didn't know. Like, but in my head, it felt like this is the most craziest thing to say, like, to say that, this is an issue. So it's a growth and it's a journey. Yeah, with my own attachment.
I love that you brought up that you also challenge yourself and heal through the work that you do too. And I think that that's also kind of like
Hmm.
important in general for people to understand when they're talking to any kind of like helping profession, therapists, all of that. A lot of the times they're also working through stuff too, and nobody's perfect. So thank you so much, Kojo. I really appreciate your content and the work that you do, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Lesser Known Self. Where can people find you on socials, online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. It's called LittleBlackBook91. So little LITTLE Black Book 91, on Instagram and on YouTube. You can also join us on our TikTok. We have two of them. So we have a TikTok called LBB91 Coaching. We do a live on there every Thursday at 8:30 UK time, which is around about 5, which is 3:30 p.m. EST for those in America. And our main one is on our Black Muscle 91 TikTok. We have a live on there. We'll shift it over in a bit, but if you follow us on Black Muscle 91, we do a live every Monday coaching, where we talk about attachments. We've been doing it for the past 11 months. Every Monday we do it at
Mm.
10:30 UK time, which is around about 5:30 p.m. EST time for you guys in America. So if you follow us on there, we're live on there. We're talking attachments on a Monday, breaking stuff down as well. So we'll be there next Monday as well. So, yeah, you can follow us on those socials.
Period. All right. Thank you,
Period, indeed.
Kojo.
Clock it.
All right. See you
No
next
worries.
time.